Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of Let's Discuss. In this episode, we're going to be talking about whether or not Fiddlesticks is OP and can be OP again. This was suggested by Tomahawk Warrior, and you can see the comment on screen. I will link his Twitch and his YouTube in the description, because I know he is also a content creator. In order to get into the idea of whether or not a champion is overpowered, we kind of need to define the words and phrases we use to describe these things. So here's my list of words that I use to describe different things, and I'll explain them. OP or broken, in my opinion, means that you have something in a champion's kit or a champion overall that you can't play around. For instance, when Akali got reworked, her W Shroud worked under enemy turrets. The turrets by default are supposed to be where you're safe. It's supposed to be how you play into assassins. You make it harder for them to kill you and snowball by having good wave management and being under your tower most of the time, or at least relatively close to your tower. Akali W got around that, and that makes it broken because you can't really play around it. Rengar's release is another good example. If you look up the champion spotlight for old Rengar, like we're talking way back when he was released, you'll see that his ult was kind of different. It was the same ult, but it didn't really have any indicator. It was just invisible Rengar jumping on somebody with no counterplay. That's also an ability I would call broken because you can't play around it, right? That's how I define broken or overpowered, because I don't think something is overpowered if you can just change numbers and call it a day. There are edge cases where you can argue, is it overpowered or is it just overtuned? Like, let's use Aphelios as an example. If Aphelios is too strong, it can be really hard to just nerf a number and then that's that. He's balanceable because it's not like you can't play around what's going on. Especially after they gave him the little visual of which guns he has next to his health bar, right? But he's an edge case because he's just hard to balance. There's also a different kind of broken champion. This could be something like when Viego was released and there was like a million bugs with him, right? Syndra on release, million bugs with him. Seer had a ton of bugs in the early days of Seer, right? Stuff like that you could call a broken champion, but that's not what we're talking about here. Because those champions are typically disabled for worlds or for whatever. So in a professional setting, we can't really use this definition of broken. You can argue that if Aphelios is strong, he's broken, but I would call that overtuned because overtuned to me means that their numbers are just too high. You can just lower their numbers, nerf them a little bit, and you'll be fine. Undertuned is the opposite. Hui was just released, right? And Hui on release was undertuned in my opinion. He didn't do a whole lot of damage. He felt like he didn't do much, even once he got a couple of items. Now, you can argue he's a late game champion, but at the same time, it really felt like you didn't do anything in the early game. He just got buffed, and I'm looking forward to playing him again, now that he's been buffed a little bit. But that's how I would describe undertuned. And then there is a champion you can play around. Now I'm speaking from a mid lane perspective, right? This is a champion you can play around by using your fundamentals. For instance, this is how you say, okay, well, if I'm playing a late game scaling mage, I need to play around the idea that I am not very good in the early game. I can probably poke a little bit, but I can't do a whole lot. I probably can't really rotate to fights all that well. I probably can't really, help my team out in the early game. For instance, I play a lot of Azir currently. I can't really help my team a whole lot before I get my lost chapter, right? So if the enemy were to play around Azir, they would either kill me before I get lost chapter and snowball, or they would do things around the map while I can't do anything. So if I, as the enemy champion, is facing Azir, I would think, okay, either I have to kill him on repeat in the early game. Maybe I pick like Tristana or something, right? And I just kill him over and over again. Or two, I roam and do stuff around the map. So someone like maybe Talon, for instance, he could actually probably do both, but he can at the very least roam very easily. Someone like Ari might be strong. Something like that, a strong early game laner, maybe Nico. This is how you play around a late game champion. So Azir is a champion you can play around. Now, Azir is also a case where he kind of has an overloaded kit, but it's also difficult to play. Azir is a weird case, but it's just an example. So when where would I place Fiddlesticks when it comes to this? Well, on this map I marked a whole bunch of orange spots, which is where I typically see Fiddle ulting from. To me, Fiddlesticks lands in the category of things you can play around. Is he overtuned, and has he been overtuned in the past? Possibly. I'll be honest, I don't follow pro play a whole lot. I don't know when he was overtuned or overpowered, as some people would say. I would call it overtuned, however, because you can play around Fiddlesticks by warding. This is the same map. All these spots are gank spots that Fiddle could use. There's probably more of them. You could ult into Baron Pit and Dragon Pit and whatever. There's edge cases for everything. Let's be honest, this is League of Legends, but these are like the ones that I see most often. It should be noted that some of them includes tower dives, but it doesn't really matter. It's mostly just the concept of like Fiddle can be here. I will also say like Fiddle could come from the river, right? Like it's not like he can't gank like from the river, from anywhere, but I'm marking spots where he can gank and not every jungler can gank, right? Like maybe Zac could gank there too, but you know what I mean. Now, how do you play into Fiddlesticks then? By having good vision, right? And you would think that in pro play people have the best vision because they can not only communicate where they want vision, but they're also incredibly skilled at the game. They know exactly what they're doing. In my mind, Fiddle should never be broken in high elo, because the champion itself is not broken. You can play around it. He can feel really busted in low elo because people don't really play around him. But in pro play, like, people should know how to play around Fiddlesticks. I don't know. I simply don't see how Fiddlesticks could ever be broken. There is only one single scenario where I could see it, and that is if we are talking about a mid lane focused meta. Or a mid lane focused comp. Like if you're playing into someone who is very mid lane focused, then maybe you could argue odds are there are like some comps that'll run a very strong early game mid laner, or like just a very strong mid laner, or someone you need to shut down early. But then the problem with Fiddle becomes you need your level 6 to do so. Like, at that point, how is Fiddlesticks OP then? You know, this is what I don't get. Like, maybe it's good into mid lane focused comps, but then Fiddle still needs to hit level 6 first, so I just don't get it. Then why not just play Zac then? If Fiddle is ever strong and picked in pro play, it's because of his numbers. It's not the kit itself, which means it's not broken or overpowered, but it is probably because his numbers were too high. And I could totally see how, I mean, there are like 5 or 6 spots that he could gank mid lane from for each team, right? He could definitely use the walls by the river. They're all viable gank options for Fiddle, so if one of them's warded, he can just use the other one. Which I guess is a fair argument, which is why my argument is that into mid lane focused comps, maybe Fiddle is okay, but again, he kind of needs his ult to do anything, so why aren't we just playing Zac? Which to me says that if Fiddle is strong, it's because his numbers are overtuned, because otherwise, why would they play him? He's not broken, in my opinion. So yeah, the champ could be overtuned again, for sure. I mean, champs go in and out of the meta for a reason, right? And mostly it's because of their numbers. So how would I describe Fiddle? Well, he's meta dependent, and maybe he's good into mid lane focused comps, but again, is Zac not just better then? Because he can do it from like level 3? You tell me. If you have anything to add, feel free to talk about it in the comments. Obviously be civil about it, we're discussing things, but I'm open to hear everybody's opinion. Thanks for watching, everyone. Like and subscribe for more discussions.